I am of a mind that there is no truly bad art, just misguided art, or films and games and books that have been tampered with from higher-ups or because the creators themselves weren't open to suggestion. The Hitman films at the time of this recording stand at 8 and 14 for critics and 41 and 57% for audience ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. Suffice it to say, these films didn't just fail to capture what makes the Hitman game special. Capturing the spirit, heart and soul of a source material while also representing its canonic story can be tricky.
Look, I know this is gonna sound strange because it is.
The Assassin's Creed film focuses on a classic blockbuster action-adventure formula, while the games themselves mostly keep a similar tone. Ezio Auditore might as well be a hooded version of Zorro, but the Prince of Persia film didn't adapt the deeper theme of looking for glory in war, only to realize how wrong that goal was.
I had fought and slain my enemies. Honor and glory were mine. But though I fight until the desert sands themselves were red with blood, I could not bring back the dead.
But even the audience seems to at best say that these are merely serviceable clones of similar Luc Besson productions, focusing on superficial elements and turning Agent 47 into a bad copy of the Transporter films only highlights that. The Hitman games were never meant to work as action films, and you don't even need to play the games to understand that. All you need to do is look at the most recent trailers to understand how a European-developed espionage stealth game with a twisted and dark sense of humor needs to be adapted with a similar level of sophistication. Or to put it bluntly, what we need is more Mission Impossible and James Bond, where our hero plays poker at a party, disguises himself to infiltrate a building and does actual espionage, and less Mission Impossible and James Bond, where our hero races on a motorcycle and jumps on cranes. The first image we see is the familiar blue ice-cold mountain scenery, which not only creates an immediately foreboding atmosphere, but is used to introduce Agent 47 in his familiar element. He's jogging because we associate this with a normal activity, and for the entire trailer we will see 47 in his natural element. You could even go as far and suggest that the forest represents the elements. We see him check his pulse, and an alternating montage begins, where we will periodically cut back and forth between 47 jogging and our story. The horizontal movements are used to direct our eyes towards details like how a man playfully would grab a bottle of wine while wearing a hazmat suit. The surreal tone is shaken up by a still life of a cup of coffee held by an ominous, almost menacing, shadowy James Bond type of villain. After some jogging, we see our targets in their respective natural element, either at the red carpet, staring at some women in bikinis, and now something a bit less familiar and more surreal, like the scientist and his wine, or the coffee drinker who is watching protesters from his window. This always reminded me of a similar scene in Inception, Chris Nolan's sophisticated thriller about dreams, and our coffee drinker's face is even obscured and only barely visible in his reflection. Models in weird outfits, a cautious look over the shoulder, with more horizontal movements and the reasoning behind the obscured face from before. Now that we briefly see him mentioned on the TV news report, it makes sense to finally reveal his face at this point and not earlier, just to get that one beat. 47's face takes up the next frame with horizontal movements signifying that he is even closer to his targets. The identical looking models, with their deadpan expression, show us their natural element, while also further keeping up with the surreal and almost creepy tone, where you can't really tell who is who. Considering the first mission lets you become a model, I have a feeling that originally 47 was supposed to be one of the models, but that might have been too weird for marketing. After some expository details and a rise in tension due to the woman looking concerned towards us, and coffee drinker looking for something, the sequence truly begins. The beat drops and 47 gets ready for his first kills. There is a great use of imagery, Eyes as a motif, both the act of looking at someone through something else, constantly being watched yourself, surveillance and scopophobia cloaking you in a sense of constant paranoia, lives not taken by 47, but by one of our villains and then kept on film. Rounding off with a close-up of a wine drop that might as well be blood. The victim then looks at the killer through the photograph he himself took previously, and the separate stories we are presented with now all get tied up as 47 takes out all his targets. We see this either directly and as gruesome as a bullet to the face, or metaphorically with classic visual storytelling such as broken glass or a timer reminding you that your time is literally up. The sequence ends with 47 taking out the final target and tilting his gun in order to catch the shell casing so he wouldn't leave a trace behind. Obviously, this was such a fantastic feat that even the version of 47 that was still jogging now has broken his record. But what does he do next? He briefly catches his breath to remind us that this genetically enhanced clone is still somewhat human, only to then calm down entirely and reveal once again that this is just an ordinary routine for him. This was basically a trailer rewind if it were done in a film class on visual storytelling. And I think it's easy to see that this 3-minute long trailer had a better understanding than both Hitman films of not just how to tell a simple story in a striking fashion, but also how to clearly establish some themes about paranoia in a big world where anonymous people send out anonymous hitmen to kill high priority targets, where you have to wonder that each accidental death reported on the news might have been an assassination. I'm not saying a movie adaptation of Hitman should win an Oscar, but what I am saying is that if Luc Besson has produced Leon the Professional, I have to wonder why it is so difficult for a video game adaptation to be something more than just a pretty okay remix of The Transporter. If you want to watch a good Hitman film, there are serviceable options out there. Final Destination captures the hilarious and over-the-top ways in which I would create accidental deaths. And Ryan Gosling's character in Drive essentially feels like a distant cousin to Agent 47 in a film that has been applauded for using visual storytelling in a very similar fashion to what I just talked about in this one trailer. The previous trailer for Hitman Absolution also had some great use of visual storytelling. Disembodied close-ups that focus on 47 putting on his gloves, rain and water being used as classical film tropes for when characters are emotionally overwhelmed, but ultimately it was more obsessed with turning Agent 47 into a hybrid of the Terminator and Max Payne. In the first trailer, 47 only took out his targets. Here, he pretty much destroys everything, which was similar criticism the game received at its release. Trailers for games have become little art house movies unto themselves, and I can't think of a better example than to tell you that Tim Miller, the man comic book fans all around the world love for directing Deadpool, has also directed this trailer for Batman Arkham Origins.